With all this talk about CO2 pipelines and their hazards, you might be asking, aren't they regulated? Aren't they regulated like oil and gas? And who regulates these these CO2 pipelines? Well, I'd like to say to you, I wish I could be conveying a different message, but they are not well regulated at all, which is one of the reasons why we're so concerned and wanted to be here with you today. First of all, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, which regulates oil and gas, for some reason decided that it does not want and does not have any jurisdiction over CO2 pipelines. This came as a surprise to many of us, including our own U.S. Congressman Dick Durbin when we spoke to him a few weeks ago. Because the FERC is known to do a pretty darn good job in regulating pipelines. They have nothing to do with this. The Illinois Commerce Commission does get involved, and they approve the overall route. Now, Wolf ADM is going to be filing, they say, any day now, and will be filing their application with the ICC this month. And the ICC will look at Wolf's project and how it relates to things like the economy, infrastructure, public safety, property values, and energy reliability, which is really interesting because, as you heard, these pipelines do not transport any energy at all. It's a waste product. So the thing to note here, and the most important thing about regulations, we think, is that it is the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration that does, in fact, have exclusive responsibility for design, construction, operation. And they have very little oversight until there's a problem. You heard about the problem from land that happened in Satartia. After that incident, PHMSA, as it will be known from here on out, fewer words, announced that it was initiating a rulemaking process because after they did their investigation on the Satartia incident, they decided, and appropriately so, that there needs to be more safety measures and more oversight for CO2 pipelines. So they've begun that process, and they expect that it'll take a good 2 years, maybe a bit longer, before they complete it. But in the meantime, we've got 2 pipeline companies making their way into Illinois that are not waiting for that rulemaking to be complete. That same thing happens with Summit in Iowa. Nobody's waiting. They want to take advantage of these dollars now while they're hot, and they're doing their deals, and they're bringing forward their projects for approval. Now, we haven't had a lot of information from Wolf ADM yet, but I pretty much expect they'll say the same thing Navigator's been telling us. They say, we're meeting or exceeding PHMSA standards, and what's the problem? But guess what? PHMSA does not regulate liquid CO2 pipelines, and much of these pipelines are going to be transported in a liquid state. Problem number 1, they don't even regulate it, you're not meeting or exceeding any standards. Number 2, PHMSA does not have design standards in place to mitigate those running ductile fractures Land talked about, where the pipeline unzips and releases large volumes of CO2. Right now, the developers have to figure that out on their own, but there is no cookbook they can go to at the federal level that says do this. They don't have odorants to detect CO2 required. Now that's a problem in 2 measures. 1, it's odorless, it's colorless. If a CO2 leak were to happen, you wouldn't know it, not unless you could smell it. And so PHMSA is looking at that. And thirdly, we hope they're going to look at, we've heard they're going to look at the first 3 bullets. We hope we can also pressure them if we need to put standards in place to limit those maximum concentrations of impurities, including water, because if a little bit of water gets into those pipelines, you heard Lance say this, it'll corrode the steel pipe, which goes to a leak, which goes to a rupture very quickly. Those are key things that our pipeline folks are not waiting to have resolved before they move forward. So now's the time that I get to kind of play off what Brian has said and said, this is our time, whether you're a spring peeper or you're a chorus frog or you're a bullfrog, we all belong in the same place together to form the resistance to make this stop. And I want to talk a little bit about what's happened before. so far with Navigator, and Henry County, as well as what we can do together. So this is a chart. I don't know how well you can read it, but it's okay if you can't, because the main point here is it depicts survey permission history at the end of December of this past year that Navigator had to file with the ICC. The takeaway here is after a full year of talking to folks, trying to get people to sign easements, they've only been able to secure 6% of the easements they need to build this pipeline without having to use eminent domain.
Woo!
6%, that's all. And that says folks along the Navigator route are resisting, and we hope you'll do that too. If you look at Henry County, I love this. Nobody has signed on with Navigator, at least as of six different people who own parcels in Henry County. It's just a little bitty blip there. So we hope, Henry County, you'll keep at it and keep that resistance up high. Moratoriums. We've been working really hard to get counties and cities to adopt moratoriums. And we've had some luck, and we're going to keep at it. 5 folks in 5 different counties, you can see the blue stars represented, have done this. And why is that important? It keeps pipelines out of the county for 2 years, or until PHMSA has adopted its rulemaking process, whichever comes first. We have a legal opinion that says that's perfectly within a county's right, and we want to make sure we're able to talk to counties and say, hey, we've got the legal opinion that says you can do this. There's no reason why you can sit here before people who are concerned and say you can't do anything. That's one thing they can do. The other thing Steve talked about, which I think is really relevant here, local farm bureaus are now beginning to step out and take a position against the Illinois Farm Bureau. As Steve explained, the Farm Bureau decided in December, that the State Farm Bureau, that CO2 pipelines, if they're tied in with ethanol plants, are okay, despite the fact that eminent domain is going to be used, despite the fact that property rights concerns exist. And the local farm bureaus, there's 3 of them so far, Montgomery, Sangamon, and Christian, are speaking out and writing letters to their members and making them public saying, this is not right. There's no analysis of environmental and economic impacts. There's a public safety concern. It's not a good use of our taxpayers. It doesn't even address the climate problem. There's no support for landowner rights, and we think the use of eminent, domain for this project sets a dangerous precedent. So, if you know anybody on the Farm Bureau board, or can talk to your Farm Bureau manager, we really ask you to do so. If you want help with that, you can contact us. We'll put you in touch with Steve if he's willing, or we can work with you. Is my point. This is a real important piece. And here's what's happened so far through the local government actions that have taken place along Navigator's route. I'm hoping we'll be able to add Peoria City Council and Peoria County Board to this list soon. And wouldn't it be great if Henry County would be willing to do this, as well as Stark, as well as all of the other counties along ADM's route. And we're growing this list every single day, this almost, not quite, but it grows regularly. And you'll find this on our website. If you go to resources, local government actions, you can look at this and watch it grow. So how do we stop this? This is where we come together, as I think I said, whether you're a bullfrog or a chorus frog or a spring peeper, we make beautiful music together, and our voices can really make a difference. So how do we do this? Steve said it. I'm going to say it again. Do not sign a voluntary easement. What you need to know is, since the time Navigator started, they have increased the number of years for compensating for reduced crop yield. And yeah, there's reduced crop yield that comes about with these pipelines. It compacts the soil. They have also decided to address and provide remediation for the field tiles that Steve talked about. Nobody believes they'll be able to fix them once they're severed, as Steve explained, but they're saying they will. And then thirdly, they have increased the price that they're offering to landowners by 50% or more, in some cases 60% from their original offer. So why would you want to sign an easement now? You don't need to, and as Steve said, if this becomes necessary, the best thing to do is to band together and get the best deal possible. The only way to stop this project is to intervene in the ICC proceedings, and that's where we really hope you will work with us to get your local governments to agree to do this. How do you do that? Well, you hold public information meetings like this. You can hold your own, we'll help you, you can call on us. Hold those public informations, get the word out, people need to be educated. Go to your county board meetings and city council meetings, like Steve said. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with who've never done that before, and with encouragement, spoke, and have found their voice to the point where they're organizing. They're organizing people to go to the county board meetings. It's great to see. You can do this. Phone calls to your county board. They need to hear from you. They need to know where you are and that you care and why you're concerned about CO2 pipelines and sequestration. Farm Bureau letters, we just talked about that. Work with your Farm Bureau. Write a letter to the editor. We have tips on our website for that. There's a whole lot of letters to the editor that have been written for the Navigator project you can look at. And then we really want to keep engaging the media. The more we get this out before the public through stories, through radio interviews, etc., the more people will know, and they'll know where to go to take action as well. But you can intervene too. And what we have done with Navigator to make this happen is we formed a nonprofit, and that allows collection of fees to pay for an attorney to represent landowners. And having one attorney that provides group representation at a fraction of the cost means we all win. So what we're proposing here, and you may have seen the sample agreement on the sign-in table, which is I'm imagining where it is, we're going to follow the same model. And that means for $500 a year, you can have group representation. And townships are taking advantage of this as well. So what we need, and I'm asking you to think about, is a few folks willing to step up and be on the board and who will work with our attorney. I don't know if John Feltham is here because I can't see, but I'm going to assume he is, and he's the president of the nonprofit Citizens Against Heartland Greenway Pipeline, and Steve is a board member of that same organization, and they can talk to you about what it means to be a board member. It doesn't have to be a lot of work, but we need people to get the structure in place to do it. And then counties, Steve also said this. Our attorney, who's going to be willing to represent those folks working with the Wolf ADM project, our attorney has come up with a super slick system where he's representing citizens group and also counties together. Everybody has to sign an agreement that says that they're going to be on the same page, and if somebody isn't, they'll have to step out. But as long as they are, then those costs can be spread across a wider swath of people. So it really does help bring the costs down for everybody. And so do take a look at that before you leave. Tracy spoke on this a bit, so I'm not going to say a whole lot, other than to say, there's no proof that it's going to stay down there forever. Look at all the pathways where it can leak. She spoke about contaminating water, but it also, if it reaches the surface, there is such a thing as too much CO2 for crops, and it can stunt crop growth with weaker root systems and fewer root systems. And of course, the fear is that it will not just contaminate your aquifer, your source of water, which is a pretty big fear, but it could release the CO2 back in the atmosphere. And we're going to be talking more about this in an upcoming meeting. Again, watch our website. Again, it's important, especially where we've got sequestration being proposed underneath our source of drinking water. And lastly, this is a big deal. This is a bill that was making its way through the State House now. A lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with the industry bill that's happening, which is HB 2202. We have a chance to pass a bill that will, in fact, do a lot of things that will provide the protections against the hazards, some of the hazards we talked about today. So this bill, and you all are probably following what's going on in other states. Little by little by little, that hope for getting a bill to pass that would curb the use of eminent domain has fizzled out. And so here we are in Illinois with another chance to do it, and our bill would prevent eminent domain for CO2 pipelines and forced acquisition of pore space or storage areas, which is like eminent domain. There is nobody who sets standards or setbacks from those pipelines. CO2, if there's a rupture, can travel a mile or more. I want to emphasize, or more. So you look at the route that Navigator has proposed, they're about 1,000 feet away. There is nothing that establishes safe setbacks. So we think this bill is important if the project has to go forward, and we hope it doesn't, but if it had to, we need that in place. And it also assures that long-term, it is the state, and it is not the state, it is the operator that is liable and responsible for long-term care of the sequestration area. So in my world, to think about taxpayers, of which I'm one, and all of you 80 people, fine people are as well, have had our dollars used for what we're calling a scheme to capture carbon, to transport it and put it in the ground. And it may not work, and it may have a lot of hazards, pose a lot of hazards and safety threats along the way. People may suffer, livestock could die. To have my taxpayers used for that is not really something I want to see. But then, after a project is over, and the company is no longer putting CO2 in the ground, to then say, now it's my taxpayers' dollars that also have to be responsible for what happens long term, is just untenable for me. So this bill would change that. And if you, like some of us here in this room, are saying, we as Illinois residents do not want to be the dumping ground for CO2, support this bill. So how do you do that? Well, you go to our website, there's the URL right there, and right on the front page, it says support House Bill 3119, and you click the link, and you can fill in your contact information and send a letter to your state representative and your state senator asking them to support this bill. And it gives the reasons in the letter why. You can write your own letter too. That's always a better way to go. But this is a standard letter you can take. So when you go home, I'm really hoping you'll do this. And when you do, I get a notification. So I'm going to know how many of the 80 people have done this who are here today. So if you feel after this presentation called to do this, please do that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Brian, because I know by now we've sat through a lot, we've had a chance to talk a bit about it, and I am betting there's a whole host of questions that are burgeoning up. And our website happens to be on two of the handouts that I'm hoping you'll take home with you today. So with that, Brian, I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you, Pam. So, let's open the floor to questions. And our speakers, Pam's still here, Len, Steve, and Tracy, if you have a question for one specific person, you can address that person. Because we want to keep this somewhat brief, this is not the place to stand up and give a lecture. If you want to have a conversation, stick around. We'll continue the